Check. Now there's sound. Bella's the best. Give it up to Bella. Informing us. We're going to have to redo everything, but it's okay. We catch it early.
Just a brief synopsis. I gave you the winning lottery tickets for tomorrow, and unfortunately, I cannot repeat them. So if you don't know how to read lips, then you're going into the next day with just as much money. But if you do know how to read lips, congratulations.
Yeah, you got it.
You
did it.
$330 million.
Congratulations. Get your Great. But not true. Real quick, rapid fire introduction. So again, my name is Jeff.
My name is Name, but you can call me Matthias.
And we were talking about, so we had an event over the weekend.
Wait, you gotta say like we're Diverses because they don't know.
Oh, well, this is Welcome to Diverses Live. We talk all things poetry.
We do talk all
and appreciate it again to Bella. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And one of the things we were talking about was, so we had an event over the weekend called Pep and Poets. Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, you got this like same color, same on.
I was actually looking at that. This was not planned.
It was. I follow Jeff's Twitter and I just wait for him to post what he's gonna wear for his outfit of the day. And he said, when he says like get ready with me, and he's like, oh, my name is Jeff. My name is Jeff. This is the shirt that I'm gonna wear. It's a great shirt. I just pulled it up out off of the floor, and I'm like, oh, I can match that.
If you can't see us, we're both wearing black and white because I like to represent my heritage. But we were
like the people on the black side are like, okay, like I like to represent my heritage. Like that's the other side. We're a little bit concerned with Jeff. Can you elaborate on that?
I refuse.
Sounds a lot like the other side.
So over the weekend we had an event called Pep and Poets, and we were talking about how I have not been to a poetry event like this because it's very unique in that, you know, a lot of times if you go to poetry related stuff, it's either going to be a reading or it's going to be like a feature or an open mic or things like that. And we ain't doing none of that. Because what we did was we got together and we said, don't read your poem. We didn't say that.
We actually said everybody they had to pull out their poems, and then we just ripped them up. And so if you had it on a laptop, we broke it. And I am sorry, Tim. We're not going to reimburse you if you're out there.
Can we get sued for that? Anyway, Tim, don't do it. We didn't tear up any poems. No, what we did was we got together and we just talked poetry. We just talked goals. We talked things that we're working on right now. We talked about frustrations. We talked about visions and things like that. And I thought it was a very productive discussion. And what I told Matthias was that I think it kind of helps solidify for me what our actual kind of like, if I had to give like a 5-second like pitch about, you know, like who we are at the bird. I found it. I think I found it.
Yeah. And that's when if you were watching, that's when I put up my wrist and I said, hey, let's like time it. But like, I'm not going to do the rules anymore. Jeff, are you ready? You're going to do your 5-second pitch?
Okay. So I'm going to do my 5-second pitch.
Okay. You ready?
I don't even know what button you're going to press.
Well, I can't press it yet.
He's going to press a button. I don't know what's
down.
See, I don't know which one. We're still going to be surprised. All right.
3, 2, 1, go.
Professional poetry development. I said it. Professional poetry development, because before what I would say is like, you know, Diverses, what we're doing is we're trying to promote the work of underrepresented voices and get people, you know, thinking about their craft and, you know, but also trying to achieve like financial goals. And that's just a long spiel. And that's not very good. So for me, like professional poetry development, that's kind of like the very short pitch. The slightly longer pitch would be professional poetry development for underrepresented voices. Slightly longer version.
Yeah, I think that's like a really, again, one of the things that makes that space so much different is because typically the conversations that we were having in that space are conversations that you might have maybe like at the end of an open mic or at the end of another poetry show where you're just kind of maybe lightly talking, oh yeah, I hope to do something like this one day, or I hope this kind of happens one day. And you're kind of throwing those things out there, and then, but you're already done with you've already tapped out all your energy from the show, and maybe you're talking to some people, and maybe you're not even taking that conversation super serious. So you're just like aspirationally, hopefully it happens one day, and then you walk out, and then you're just gonna keep doing open mics or you're going to keep doing which is okay. These are good things, but it's just to say that you're not going to really put a lot of action towards those things later on. So it was really good. It was really cool, I think, to really not just have those, not wait for those conversations to happen at the end of shows, but like, what if the thing that we do at the end of shows where we just kind of, romance about how great it would be to be able to make this a full-time thing. Like, oh, let's actually have that conversation.
This is the
let's
show.
Make it.
This is the show. Yeah.
We've cut out not the middleman, but we've cut out the front man, and we've made the guy that's in the back, but he's not the middle. He's just the bad guy. We've made that guy like the main guy, or girl, or whoever they are. Just that's the main person.
And so, speaking of this idea of like professional poetry development, something I wanted to work on today was trying to kind of walk you through steps. Maybe you're a person that writes poetry, and maybe you're an underrepresented voice. Maybe you're Bella. And
our voices were underrepresented on this very podcast earlier because we couldn't even hear us.
Yeah, not even represented.
Not even zero representation.
Zero representation.
So we fit the bill. Half of Jeff fits the bill, and half of both of our shirts.
And so today, our main topic that we're going to be discussing is we're going to be really focused on trying to approach your writing from a stance of, let's say you want to start handling your writing in a way that you view as professional. When I say that, I'm thinking job. I'm thinking income. You want to make it something that's sustainable financially for you in some capacity. And one of the things that's going to be necessary then is you have to do something that is generating income for you. And the way in general you do that is you have to find a way to give value to others. And we've talked about this before.
Yeah. I think even when we're talking about having like bringing value or like being able to establish value, a lot of it is going to come from you actually really understanding what you bring to the table and like understanding like thoroughly what you bring to the table, because that's a kind of a sticking point for a lot of people, because you might have a lot of, I mean, even when we were talking on Sunday,
keep talking for a second. I have to adjust something. Keep talking.
Okay. So even when we were talking about on Sunday, I think a lot of people, they were talking about things that they either do or they are, or positions that they're in, and elements that they have at their disposal that they're just not really aware of, or they're not really understanding, like, okay, that's a plus, and that's something that you can not monetize. Well, actually, yeah, monetize. But these are things that you can put on the table, and if you just really get active towards them, you can use that. That's a tool in your next step of professional development. And I just like, it's always good to be able to not only see that development, but also once you recognize it, really kind of put it in its proper place, in its proper context. Because I mean, a lot of us have things, or we either have skills, or maybe we have a space, maybe we have, even if you just like a car, maybe you have like, like a camera, like anything, you have a lot of things at your disposal that if you just put those things into action, you can, I mean, maybe they're not going to get you to your goal up here, but they're going to get you to the next step.
I'm just going to feature your microphone a little bit more. There you go. Actually, you touched on something I think is really important, like knowing what you bring to the table. I want to go back to this specific point. So there's a marketer I've been studying a lot recently. His name is Daniel Priestley. I mentioned him in previous podcasts. We mentioned him especially with regards to strategies for creating events and things like that. If that's something you're interested in, there's a book called Oversubscribed, which I highly recommend. It's what I'm working through right now, and it's super, super, super practical. But one of his first concepts is the concept of what he calls a key person of influence. And this speaks directly to what you were just mentioning, is kind of knowing what the specific skill set and value that you can give to other people. And we're going to kind of approach this from a writing perspective. So for instance, our platform, again, professional poetry development for underrepresented voices, we are positioning ourselves in this specific area because the reality is right now, if you look up resources for poets to develop like a poetry business around what they're doing, it's not really a whole lot out there.
Yeah.
There's just not. So that's our goal. We're trying to become authorities in this area. And so that's kind of the very first thing I would suggest for you. This is something that interests you, is deciding. Yeah, you out there. You
know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you know. Yeah. So deciding what it's the
I'm sorry. I shouldn't raise my voice.
What's the specific thing you bring? Because this is important. Our goal is to become a position of authority that people can turn to achieve a specific thing. And if you just say, oh, people just come to me for poetry, or if you're a writer, maybe like people come to me for novel writing, that might not be enough, because there's a million, like there's so many books out there. So we need to really kind of start thinking, what's that way that you're really going to start separating yourself?
Yeah, somebody actually on Sunday, they had brought something up to that, like something of that nature. They was just saying that there's so many publications, there's so many published selections that are out there. They didn't want to add to it. And I think your response, even in that space, was interesting, because I believe kind of the angle that she was going for was, a lot of this stuff is like for me personally. And I think that, kind of the driving force and the goal behind a lot of the stuff that happens on Diverses is, okay, these are, you enjoy the art, you enjoy the craft. These are all good things, but no matter what level that you are, whether you are this highly esteemed, traveling poet somewhere, which again, I think at any level you could always increase your production, and like maybe not necessarily output
for sure,
but when we're talking about what you get from your output, or just kind of strategy, and so I think that even in that space, I think it was good, because you're able to retort with these are all good things, and it's great if this stuff is personal, but a lot of the things that we're doing here and the ways that we're working is for you to be able to take that, and for you to be able to live on it, not just okay, this is really great, but like, okay, so what are the ways that you can live on it that's not this, I'm this world traveling, this like, that's great if that is you out there, that's amazing, but there's other ways to be able to use your work to feed yourself, to really bring some things in. So I think, yeah.
And in fact, that also lets you know that you actually have a position, because I talked to, just on like socials and things like that, just communicating with a lot of writers, just trying to figure out, what they're doing. And I think a lot of people don't have a specific thing. They're like, oh, I just want my book to be read. I just want to be published. It's the art. You know what I mean? And
I'm not
cool.
talking about my friend art. I'm talking about like the art.
The art?
I don't want to brag, but I do have
the art. And again, that's perfectly fine if like that personal stuff is like what you want, but I think also that lets you know that my platform and what we're doing here probably ain't for you, and that's okay, because if you have a position, that means that some people have to hear what you're about and say, no, I disagree, or no, I'm not interested, or just to be able to say no, because the more that you can narrow and specify, the more you can be like, hey, all those people, there's 7 billion people over there, I'm not for them, but though that 100 people right there, this is the people I am focusing on. And the more you're able to do that, and this ties back into, if you like this idea of a key person of influence, to become an authority for a specific group of people on a specific topic.
Yeah. And we talked a lot. I mean, I keep bringing it back to like Sunday, but I mean, I guess a lot of stuff that we're talking about is kind of bridging that gap, or kind of not necessarily a gap, but it is creating a bridge there. But I think that one of the really good things that when it comes to, we talk about marketing a lot, and we talk about advertising, and really being able to find the person out there that, you don't necessarily have to appeal to everybody, right? Because not everybody is going to be able to find use for the things that you do. And even when we're talking about Diverses in that capacity, if somebody's like, well, the only use that I have for my poems is I really like to wake up and know that I have poems, and then go back to sleep afterwards. That's fine. I'm like, okay, so I mean, and that's great. That's absolutely fantastic. And I think that's, you know, whatever, if that cultivates something for you that you really are passionate about and that you really, really love, and you don't want to turn it into, you don't want to make things happen outside of that, that's great. But it's actually, I mean, one of the things I was thinking about earlier, if you think about like Subway, right? Think about like a sandwich artist. Like there's probably people at Subway that love making sandwiches.
Is that
right?
the name of the people behind that? Are they called sandwich artists?
You never knew that?
I never knew that. So like, so cafes have baristas and Subways have sandwich artists.
Yeah, you didn't know that?
I had no idea.
Shout out if you're a sandwich artist out there. Like,
they use that name artist very loosely. That's all I'm going to be saying. Very, very loosely.
He's never had a double turkey BLT. Okay, like that's. It gives you a different perspective.
We just throwing out names out here. That's cool.
But yeah, so like I think that like, okay, like, and again, this is just conceptually. If you have somebody that's like, okay, I love to make sandwiches. I'm just out here in the world, and whenever I get a chance to make a sandwich, I make a sandwich, and that's great. And if that's all you need from making sandwiches, that's perfectly fine. But if you could find a position where you could make sandwiches, and they pay you to do it. And not only do they pay you to do it, but then they let's say they pay you fairly well, and because of the fact that you make sandwiches so well, like let's kind of cut out not necessarily cut it out, but let's take this idea that you're supposed to be this rich, super, 500 millionaire, let's take that out the paradigm. Let's just say if you could do being a sandwich artist, or in this case what we're talking about, like if you doing poems, and I think Ty was bringing this up as well. If you could do that and make the same amount of money that you're making right now, that's making right now, and let's say you're working a job that you actually don't like, that you actually wish you could be doing something else, that's an immediate life improvement. You know what I mean? That's an immediate, like, oh, I've found a value in being able to really monetize this, because I could do this and make, even if I'm not making any more money, I'm making exactly the amount of money that I'm making right now, I've improved. And that's let alone if you're able to do larger things. So
that's interesting you bring up the sandwich, because it's the same kind of idea. So speaking of because there's different types, like for instance, like if you go to Philly, like there's like cheesesteaks, like it's a specific, you go to a cheesesteak place for a cheesesteak, you go to, I mean, why wouldn't you? Personally, I'm a chicken cheesesteak person. I'll be honest.
You're a chicken cheesesteak person?
That's what. When I go back home, that's
if they're from Philly and they like a chicken cheesesteak, get them out of here.
I think the chicken cheesesteak, in all honesty, is even more Philly than a regular cheesesteak. When's the last time you were outside of Philly and someone asked for a chicken cheesesteak?
Anybody ask me for a chicken cheesesteak in Philly? We need Beanie Siegel to call in. Beanie Siegel, if you're out there.
But anyway, but like there's different types of sandwiches, right? So like you go to a cheesesteak place for that. You go to like a hoagie place for that. You go to like some places they specialize in grilled cheese. Like all of these are sandwich shops, but they're very specific. And it's the same thing. It's like just saying, oh, I'm a poet. It's going to be hard to really separate yourself. Be like, oh, I do dad poems. Okay, now we're narrow. I do multiracial dad poems. Now we're the more we can like hone in, the more we can start becoming an authority in that space. People can turn to us for this very specific thing.
And it's that reads true across really any medium.
100%.
When you're talking about
100%.
We're talking about like inclusion, and we're talking about like being able to hear your voice and like being like representation and things like that. If I'm watching a movie and the most specific that they get when it comes to like, oh, I'm representing you is, oh, it's a black man. So like, okay, that's good. Like that's not like the worst thing ever, right? Like maybe if
you hear that,
like,
it's not the worst thing.
You hear that, Jerome? Yeah, great. But like, no, but it's like, it's not the worst thing ever for them to be like, oh, representation is a black man. But if they're like, oh, a black man who I don't know, who grew up in this specific like his backstory is he grew up with this specific faith. Now all of a sudden I'm like, man, it kind of maybe narrows a focus in on me, and then maybe like grew up in this neighborhood around these. Now like you're you're kind of cutting and you're cutting away the things that you're not. Kanye has. Okay, I'm gonna bring up Kanye West for a second.
This could go a lot of different directions.
There's a song on Graduation where Kanye says, "Everything I'm not made me everything I am." And so I think when you think about that as an artist, and when you think about that as far as like the things that you're creating, it's like I think a lot of people, they're trying to do the thing where they're trying to appeal, they're trying to make their let's make it about poems.
My poetry's for everybody. Everyone can read my poem. Everyone can read my poem.
But the thing is, they also write their poems like that, right? So like their poem has 50 different topics that they're addressing, and that typically they're fairly preachy on all of them. So they're giving you all of the points of view that are like that you would expect somebody to just at least openly agree with, right?
Oftentimes it's not even an I. A lot of times it's just some communal, like war, horrible, the bombs. Like it's like,
and so so like they're kind of they're using the tool of everybody is included in my message because my message is everybody, right?
Which means that it's really no one is included
because it's not close enough to anybody.
No one can identify.
You only have this much, like, you know, you have this much currency to really captivate an audience. And now I can give if I have $100, I can give everybody $1, and I can hope that, you know, they want to come see, or I can give, you know, 5 people $20. That's math, right? That's good math.
I'm not.
Or did I just really overpay?
I wasn't listening.
My Burger King guy. I don't have a specific Burger King guy, by the way. The Burger King guy is just a guy that works at Burger King.
Is he a hamburger artist? Is that what they call him?
He is a hamburger artist.
Is that what they call him?
Not a hamburger, ironically enough. He works
branded
at McDonald's. but yeah, so like, or you can have, or you can pay 5 people $20, and like that's gonna get you, like, maybe those people are gonna be a little bit more devoted because they're like, this is $20. Now you can even make it even slimmer, not 2 people $50. Now they're like, oh, like you're extending this really hyper focus towards these 2 people because you know that the return on that is going to more than likely be somebody that's going to ride with you forever, as opposed to somebody who's like, oh, you kind of captivated 1% of who I am, and that's fine, but I can, that's a passing thought.
And the other thing too is that you're honing in on this specific group, but that doesn't mean other people won't find you. Like, it extends outwards. Like, other people are still going to find you, even if you're not directly targeting them. Okay. Not everyone who interacts with our platform identifies as an underrepresented voice.
Yeah.
There are a lot of white women out there, which is okay. Cool.
We just need to cut that. And there's a lot of white women out there. Like, okay.
Have you been interrupted by this?
Yeah. I guess you're not wrong.
Which isn't necessarily like the target that like we necessarily had in mind, but like there's still things that like people can still apply to their.
Jeff says that sentence like more often than you would maybe think. He just,
to be fair, it was the first time today.
First time today, like first time during the business day. Like, okay, I'm not counting out. When I wake up in the morning, it's just like I'm just pointing out there's a lot of white women out there.
So again, this is like other audiences are still going to find your work and find things resonate with them, even if you're not necessarily directly targeting those people. And I think that to give some other examples, like let's say, so first practical step number 1 is, if this is something that interests you, find out what is something that's specific about your work that either no one else is doing or a much smaller portion of other poets is doing. And to give some other examples like that, so for instance, again, our platform, again, professional poetry development for underrepresented voices. One of the things I was talking with Matthias, or that we talked about at Pep and Poets on Sunday, was you mentioned short film, like trying to find a connection between short film and poetry. Super narrow. Cool. Like if Matthias wanted to develop just a business just around, hey, we focus on linking poetry and short film, you could do that.
Oh yeah.
That could be a very specific thing.
Oh, it's happening.
Another thing, yeah, I hope it does. Hope it does.
Maddie with the cam
Yeah.
on things.
Yep.
maybe not. Who knows?
You can find him. He out there. Other things are I was talking to a guy, we already mentioned him, a guy who was also at Peppa Post. His name was Ty. He's interested in zines. He makes zines. So like short, like small, like publications you can do with your own poetry. He's done workshops and things to teach people how to make these things. You know, so finding what is your specific thing that you can build off of. Once you have that, the goal really becomes trying to establish yourself in that position of authority. And a couple different ways to do that. We're in writing, but even if in these things that we're talking about today, you don't just have to apply to writing. If you have another interest of yours, it's all applicable. Yeah. So one of the things that can really help with that is creating a book. Publications, like writing the book, not just to be like, I need to have a book out there. No, writing the book as a credential point, because people still respect books. If you're interested in trying to land, for instance, like speaking gigs, if you're trying to get interviews at different places, a lot of times what ends up happening is people won't even notice you until you have the book.
Yeah. And that kind of rings true when it comes to like just we were talking about like professorships, and we're talking about like having teaching gigs on last week's show. And so if you're like watching this now and you're interested about what I just said, then you should go to last week's show and you should watch that as well, because I think it was a really good episode. But yeah, so we were talking about that, and I think there's a lot of spaces where it's like, okay, in order to really have this position or really hold down this position, you have to have this book, which is in a lot of ways it kind of credentials you, because now you're like, I'm a person that has a
your business card.
But then it's also like it is, I mean, actually maybe not also, but in other wording, it establishes you in the field, like squarely in the field, because you know, I don't want to say anybody, but a lot of people can, you know, kind of talk somewhat about the things that they're doing. There's not a lot of people that will do the commitment thing, which is write the book. You know what I mean? And that's like true. once you have that established, and you're now, because if I wrote a book about, you know, making coffee tables, and I was like, okay, this is how you make a coffee table, like you can best believe that like I need to make more coffee tables, and I need to really push myself in making these coffee, because I've already written a book about making coffee tables, and so I have to keep going. And so that's kind of, you know, what we were talking about that a little bit last week, but then just like a little bit when we're talking about this here as well. Just this idea that once you have this book, once you have this proof of concept that is, you know, tangible, or maybe at the very least in thought is tangible, because you can go to I don't know if you guys believe in Amazon, but Amazon or like any kind of other bookstore or what have you, to be able to pick it up, then at that point you really are digging your feet in your field, and I think people kind of recognize that.
And it's just a reality. And I think a lot of times when a lot of writers get the book out, I think a lot of times they put the book on the high pedestal, when in reality the book is it's like the soil that you plant the seeds into. Like it starts everything else. It's not even, a lot of times, like the book's not even about the book. I mean, yeah, you want the book to, like, you know, generate income and things for you, like for sure, but the book opens up so many other doors for you. Yeah, if you know what you're looking for, like if you use it as that sort of tool. So I wouldn't want you to view the book as the end product. If anything, the book is the starting.
Yeah. Shout out to Dante Wood Spikes. What is Through Their Eyes, I believe.
I literally just included it in a video. I'm making. I forget to.
First of all, shout out to Dante
Wood Spikes. Yeah,
Dante Wood Spikes, great guy. But he's one of the people that I think of when I think of somebody who's they understood that the book needed to be not just the book. It needed to be you can use a chapter of the book in order to kind of get this gig, or you can use this section of the book. Something just happens at this school, like hopefully it's not something anything dire, but maybe there's like some new implementation that these teachers are using, and so now he can bring this multi-layered book, something that has an array of different messages, and then you can really say, well, hey, I talk about this in my book. Like that line alone will get you in a lot of doors. I talk about this in my book. Like even people that are well established and have been, well established for years, they use that line. But it's primarily because it credentials them and it shows them, hey, this stuff isn't, these aren't things that I'm just winging. Like I have a book that I elaborate upon this like very thoroughly. Shout out to Dante again. Yeah. John, you get Dante, you understand.
But in addition to books, what are some other ways that you can start generating authority? So I know that there's this, people are going to hear this and they're going to roll their eyes. Podcasting, people's like, oh my gosh, everyone, and especially like during the pandemic, every guy just in his 30s just started a podcast. And I know that people look at us like, look at you guys start your podcast. But podcasting is a way that, again, if just helps further establish your reach. And in fact, I would encourage you not just to consider podcasting, I would again consider video podcasting, because now, I mean, what we do, so we have a podcast. You can find it at theversuspoetry.com/podcast. We have links to the videos because this is part of our video podcast, but then we also cut sections into just audio. So we also have an audio version as well. So people are able to find you on different media. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to expand our reach where we can put things, we want to try to put things, because the more things we can get out there, the more people can, one, find us, but two, it also helps to, again, establish credentials and authority, because people will be like, oh, wow, you've been talking about this topic for 6 months, or, oh, you have 100 episodes on this thing, or, oh, you've been doing this, so again, it's just another resource that you can point people to start demonstrating a little bit of expertise.
Yeah, I think, and kind of to touch on what you just said, because you hear that all the time when you hear people say like, "Oh no, you're starting a podcast. Oh, everybody, we should ban the microphone." It's like that.
Yeah, people don't.
Oh, we should use that move for Halloween too.
Nah, it's a very different sound.
Nah. I feel like ghosts would boo us sometimes as well.
My grandma would boo me. My grandma's definitely a ghost, by the way. She like turns on lights and crap. She changes.
She turned all this.
She talks like before. She talks to my aunt like Bumblebee does in Transformers, like through the radio, like the songs.
For real?
Like,
I know this is not where y'all expected this podcast to go.
I wasn't.
But now the rest of this time is all about Jeff's ghost family members.
Camilla Anderson. God bless your zombie bones. No words of Futurama.
What if we're ghosts? What if we're Bruce Willis? What if we are thinking that they're ghosts and they're just real? And Bruce Willis is like, I'm so confused. Like nobody talks to me anymore. Like that idiot. Bruce.
But anyways, I don't want to derail.
I don't want to derail after I brought up my ghost grandmother. Oh man. But no, I think a lot of people they say stuff like that, but it's kind of, I don't want to say it's not disheartening for me, because if there's something that I really was passionate about and I thought like, okay, I feel like I can do it. The worst case scenario is that I can't. You know what I mean? Like the worst case scenario is that I'm doing it for a long time and like maybe I don't get, like maybe I find out this is just not my calling. I'm just I'm not, maybe I give it my best shot and it's like, but that's the worst case scenario. Like that's the worst case scenario for me. But I think the worst case scenario for a lot of people, and this is I think more of like an aspirational like kind of tilt to the messaging, is that they hear stuff like that. They hear stuff like a lot of people are doing podcasts. I'm like, okay, and you are also a lot of people. Like you're part of a lot of people, and maybe your like while a lot of people do podcasts, not everybody's is successful for sure. And the thing is that people get mad at, like I've seen people get mad at well, actually I'm not going to bring up the podcast, like that might be a little whatever, but they get mad at these like other podcast platforms. They're like, oh my gosh, we need to get rid of the microphones and stuff like that. And I'm like, you're talking about them right now. You know what I mean? Like, you're talking about that podcast right now. And the reason why you're talking about it is because you've listened to several episodes and you've committed a very good amount of your life to being very frustrated that they exist. And I'm like, okay, well, listen, that person that made that podcast, for as much as you hate them, it's like, that's your hatred is a monetizable metric. And they're like, there's going to be some people out there that just hate us. But the thing is, like, there's plenty of people out there that really love their platform. And I'm like, yeah, like, that's like it's such a hater move. Like, I don't have I used hater on this podcast before?
No, it sounds a little strange coming from you, but
well, let me go ahead and hit the
I said some weird things too, so
you brought up your ghost grandmother. Like, I'm not gonna be able to compete with that. but outside of that, but yeah, it's just, I think it's just like, it's such a hater energy, right? Because now you're this person who's like, because of the fact that I don't like that there's so many of them, that you want other people to stop them, like that you want other people to stop. And I'm sure there was like, in a long time ago, there was a guy who's like, man, I don't know when was pizza invented, whatever, let's say 1800s, but let's say that's probably before that.
I think it's
well before that. 1995 when pizza was invented.
After Y2K.
No, well, Y2K was after 1995.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the year 2000.
Yeah.
Time moves linearly. Yeah. But yeah, so essentially, like, whenever pizza was invented, there's probably like the second guy to make a pizza shop, they're probably like, get this guy out of here. Like, what is he doing? There's already a pizza shop over here. Well, I feel like I could make pizza better. And then better pizza, better ingredients. Don't. Not but yeah, but it's just to say that don't let somebody's, like, don't let that energy kind of stop you, and not even from other people. Like, don't let the voice inside your head that says, oh, there's already somebody that has several books, there's already somebody that has a pod, like okay, fine, fair enough, find your edge, find the thing that makes you unique, and push forward with it. Because I mean, if you just, the only way to be sure that it will never work is if you just never do it. Like, that's the only way to be 100% sure. But the time to really start anything, the best time to start anything was 5 years ago. The next best time to start anything is like right now. You know what I mean? So just do it.
Yeah. And I think just in terms of markets and things like that, how many millions of active YouTube channels are out there right now? Social media platforms like active profiles, or like TikToks and things like that. Podcasting is actually still very, very underutilized. Like, the number of active podcasts, active in terms of like posting like once a week or something like that. I was like, I have to find the statistics. I'll try to find it after the stream and post links. I believe it's under like 1 million. Yeah. It might even be less than like 500,000, which is wild.
It makes sense because, I mean, even when people start things, it's like that consistent. You still have that. There's a lot of people. I think we were talking to one of the girls that was at thing on Sunday, which you should
Pep and Poets.
Pep and Poets. You should
first Sundays of the month. Columbus, Ohio.
But she was just talking about, and thing is, life happens, right? So like, nobody's saying that like life can't happen. But she was just saying that like, yeah, like I started this. I think was it a zine? Was it a blog? And she started the blog, and then kind of life happens, the pandemic happens, things kind of got derailed, and she's looking at kind of starting it again here soon. But which is just to say, like, that's also kind of part of the competitive market, because it's not just a matter of whether or not somebody has something or can start something, it's whether or not somebody can keep it going for however long it would take to really be super successful. There's plenty of podcasts that if you were to see them when they first started, you'd be like, they're going to be doing this
these
for a couple
guys,
weeks, couple months. And now they're like these huge platforms, because the only thing that the biggest difference between them and their next competition is that when they could have stopped, they just kept going. Like time is a heck of an accelerator.
You mentioned blogs. I've talked about this before. One of the advantages also of a podcast is you can take the transcripts, you you turn them into blog posts. So for instance, if you go to versuspoetry.com/podcast, you'll see that there's actually a blog underneath it. What are we using for the blog post? I'm just taking transcripts from past episodes and just cutting them into short, like 250, 300 word sections, and blog posts. So like each live stream, honestly, can become, if I wanted it to be, like 10, 15 different blog posts and things like that, which is another way to kind of continue to establish your authority. Because basically you want people, like, if they Google you, how much space you taking up?
And what if they Bing you? What if they ask Jeeves about you? Which is funny because there's already crickets.
I was actually thinking that too. I was actually thinking we have the windows open because it's hot. So you're trying to take up more space. I do want to talk about some other strategies that you can also employ to start, building up that authority, building up that community. One of the strategies actually on our Threads account, which you can find us at The Versus Poetry on Threads and Instagram and Facebook. But on the Threads, what I'd done, I posted a challenge, and I meant to save it. I don't know if I saved it. No, I didn't do that. So what I did was I posted a challenge for people. I just said, hey, reach out to a poet whose work you like and just send them a message that just says, hey, something to send of, I liked your work. I saw your work here. I read it. I liked it. You can point out something if you want. And that's it. Takes a second. Literally did it in less than a minute. Literally, I went over to a journal. I found a poem that I liked. I found, okay, where's the author's name? Oh, it's this guy. So I went to Google. I found the author's name, found his website, sent him a message. And know what he did?
Send a message back.
He sent a message back, but you know what he also did?
Started a conversation?
A little bit, yeah. He looked up something from me. He mentioned a poem that I had written. So he looked up, oh, wow, I found this poem of yours, and I like that. So now we've started a conversation. So this is a way that you can start engaging with people. How long does it take to find one poet? What if you extend this? What if instead of just one poet, I did that with like 10? Or what if we extend it? What if I didn't just do it with 10 poets? What if I did that with 10 poets every day for a week?
Yeah.
What if I did it every day for a year? I just connected with, oh my gosh, 3,000.
I feel like it's more than 3.
No.
Done math, right?
I wasn't done. Like imagine, like you, if you did 10, if you just read journals and just reached out to 10 poets a day, you would reach almost 4,000 people.
I mean, and even if if 10 is daunting, because I think a lot of people kind of view like, even if you're, because like what Jeff did was a single person, right? And if you just said, okay, if I wake up in the morning and I just try to find a poem I really like, and then like kind of make it like that was fairly practical, but like just kind of make it practical. If I read a poem that I like, then I have to contact them. I have to contact them. Everybody's on social media. Everybody's there. So it's like, I have to contact them. And then you just make it even simpler. I have to read 5 poems a day. Now it's like, okay, you're going to find, if you read 5 poems a day, at the very least, 1 or 2 of them you're going to like, at least, you know what I mean? And that's if you're not really specifically looking for poems that you would like anyway, you know what I mean? So at the very least, 1 or 2 of them you're going to like. And so now you have this vehicle where it's like, you're in the habit of just showing appreciation to people that are, and I think it kind of makes it feel kind of mechanical, but I think a lot of people kind of need the mechanical nature of those interactions, or the funnel to those interactions, in order to get into the rhythm of that just being how they engage. Because a lot of people, they'll read a poem and that will be the last time they ever think about the author until next time they see a poem that they like, but they'll never kind of show that adoration or never show that appreciation. And that part is kind of the point, because it's always good as a writer to hear somebody say like, hey, I appreciate your work. But the thing that happens afterwards is even the larger point, where now people are making it a regular habit of engaging not just with the work, but with the worker of the words. And that's like that's important, and that's a community building.
It's community building. It's also an authority building tool, because especially like if let's say that there's a journal you're trying to get in, but you're having trouble getting in, we'll starting reaching out to those poets that are in there with the poems that have, you know, that you enjoy, and reaching out to those poets, starting dialogues with poets who are doing the things you want to do. You know what I mean? These could be also opportunities. Again, if you start like a podcast or a blog, those are opportunities to invite them in, you know, for interviews and things like that. In general, poets are pretty friendly, you know, and if they're want
not,
to help,
take them because they're poems. They're poets, right? So like, you could fight.
And then, yeah, so you can muscle them into your podcast or your blog or whatever you're doing.
That's how I got
conversation.
He's surprisingly strong.
I'm very scrappy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This vest used to be a regular shirt, and then
just it was less screaming. There was less screaming. Actually, kind of speaking on a similar note to that, well, one strategy I see a lot of people do. I see it happen, and I always kind of just like how many times have you seen on social media where someone has a poem come out or a book or they have their own blog? Maybe this is probably a good example. They have their own website. They want to get people to their website. So what do? They post a link to their website. They're like, hey guys, I put a new poem on my website. Here's the link. Check it.
See it all the time.
Hey, no one's gonna click that. No one's gonna click that. People aren't going to these platforms to go to your website. They're on the platforms to use the platform. You know, so it's like directed. It's really, really hard to direct people off site. So one strategy, this doesn't work for everything, but let's talk Facebook, because Facebook, I know it's the old platform that, you know, has a reputation and things like that. However, there are still
Facebookers out there.
There are still active communities with regards to writing and poetry on Facebook. So
Facebook, it's actually kind of, I think, because of the way that Facebook is platformed more than a lot of other platforms, because it almost has like these other rooms and these other spaces
it's actually easier to be social.
And so yeah, like I meant actually a cousin of mine, it's so funny because, like, you know, I've seen her. I saw her like last year during the holidays, April. But shout out to her, she's an author too. But it's so interesting because I remember being like, I had her on Instagram, like we follow each other on Instagram, but we like also talk to each other, and I had no idea, like on Facebook she's like 76,000. Like on Instagram it's like, you know, a couple hundred, like 400, something like that. And I just remember being like looking at this platform and being like you've like done some incredible work. And I think that, again, Facebook is, I think, because of its utility in other spaces, I think a lot of other people, they're like, if you're trying to get famous and stuff like that, like, you know, like they kind of go to Twitter. IG maybe not so much, just because of how hard it is to kind of really push yourself in that. There's people like Twitter and stuff like that. But yeah, no, Facebook, man, you can really create a community, and people, once you open up that page and now you're inside of that page, it's like you're in the same. On Twitter, it's like if I see a thread of things that, you know, I'm interested in, if I keep scrolling, I'm gonna leave that thread. I'm gonna lose that thread. Whereas in Facebook, it's like that thread is that entire page, and now everybody in here is just talking about this thing. I'm in like 12 different, like, you know, Naruto groups. Shout out to Naruto if you guys are Naruto fans. But I'm like a whole bunch of like Naruto groups and stuff like that. And it's like, you know, it's community building because everybody is in that space to talk about Naruto or about how Sakura kind of ruins the series. She doesn't ruin the series. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. But if you're a Naruto fan, you know. But yeah, it's just to say that yeah, Facebook is a really good tool.
It's the only platform that really has groups, like, and I think it's hard to use them nowadays just because, again, a lot of people hear Facebook and they get turned off by that. But like, I wish a lot of the other platforms had a group sort of thing where you could create a separate space. I mean, you can make your own like WhatsApp group. You know, that is another option. Speaking of community, things like that, if people are willing to share their numbers and things like that, if you created a space for that. There's also like Slack and Discord. I feel like Slack's kind of tricky because people associate that with work. So I don't think people want to do the outside work. Discord seems to get more of the informal stuff, but not. I don't personally like the interface for Discord. I don't know if you use it a lot. It's like, it's not.
Yeah, I don't like it
I don't think it's like, I get it, I know how to use it, but I don't think it's like the most beginner user friendly. But anyways, so I mentioned about the fact that a lot of people on like platforms are like, they just post a link to their site and say, hey, check out this thing on my site or my blog or my whatever. And it's really hard when people are signing on to these platforms. They're not thinking about leaving them, so unless you have something that's super, super enticing, most likely they're not going to do it. So an alternative, what if you can find a way to get other people to talk about your stuff? Because if you talk about your own stuff, people are going to be like, oh, this is just like self-promotion. Like, they're just going to like scroll past it. But if you get other people starting to talk about your stuff, suddenly things start opening up more. So to give an example, this again is a technique that's discussed by Daniel Priestley. One of the things he talks about is go to Facebook. And again, you adapt this to whatever platform you need, but go to Facebook. Find a group that's interested on a topic that you're interested in. So, for instance, if it's poetry or something like that, and you want to try to do this with, a group that's really dedicated to what you're interested in, has enough numbers for what you're looking for. Maybe not like necessarily the biggest one, but do what you need to do. Reach out to the owner of the group, like the moderator of the group. And there's a couple of different ways you can handle it. You can ask them, hey, like, we run a podcast or we run a show or we run a blog or we do this. I would love to like have like a 10-minute interview with you. Or if that's too time demanding, I just have a series of quick questions. Can you answer these questions? Like, for instance, what are 2 tips you would give to a poet? If that's too much, okay, I'm compiling a list of just tips for poets. Can you give me like 1 tip that you give to poets and things like that? We'll be happy to link to your group and promote your group and things like that when it actually comes out. Because what it's not always going to happen, but what's often going to happen is once you release that, the group owner and the moderators, they're involved in the group. This is good for them. They're getting on to another platform for themselves. So what they are more likely to do, because if you just went to the group and you just posted your stuff, that's probably not going to fly. But if the owner is like, hey guys, I just did this interview where I gave this tip and it was included. Like if you're getting the owner involved, it becomes more of a collaborative sort of thing. They may be more open to directly posting it into their own community.
Something that I've done in the past that kind of utilizes that concept is essentially like if there is like local brands or like local thrift, like there's like either like local thrifters or local like just clothes makers and stuff like that. I'll use them in like either I'll use them in a photo shoot or I'll photo shoot people that are familiar and stuff like that with them, or like even like I took a picture in front of like their storefront and I just tagged them like, okay, we're in front of this building. They liked the picture. I messaged them, I'm just like, hey, I really, really, really rock with your clothes. Really, really rock with the stuff that you guys got going on in there. Really beautiful aesthetic inside. We talked for a little bit and then we actually did a brand. We ended up first we went to the point where they were just like, yeah, here's a couple pieces, like, and we were able to just use them for some shoots. But then they actually brought us in, like, well, they brought me in to be able to actually do some shoots cool. Like for like their product, which is really cool because the thing that I don't think like in real time I wasn't necessarily thinking about it, but what it kind of gave us the ability to do was be able to go in and actually work with a brand. And now I can be like, okay, I've worked with this brand before. And now later on in conversations, I can be like, oh yeah, I've worked with this brand. And what brands love is that if you've worked with a brand that you can work with them too, because you've worked with brands before. But it all kind of stemmed from, kind of being able to kind of figure out that way in. And then that way, it's not just you kind of pushing your product. Now you have somebody else who's like, oh, we recognize we have some mutual interests, but also you recognized me, so like, yeah, like let me kind of like reciprocate that. I actually did that. I got some pictures up on I don't know if I should say it's It's a pop brand. They're like, it's almost like Sprite, but it's not quite Sprite.
Pop soda thing.
But we actually took some pictures in a gas station, and we actually held up the can, and then they liked it,
and then we held up the store. No,
we're on the run right now, but please drink Sprite. But yeah, it was so interesting because we took a picture and we just tagged the pop. We tagged like everything.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the one that liked it, and then they reposted us on their story, and we got a couple followers out of that. But really, we got a little dialogue like, oh yeah, I drink your pop all the time, it's great.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, great. And now maybe later on down the line, you know what I'm saying, there might be like looking for some brand stuff, and maybe they reach out to me, maybe you know what I'm saying, or maybe I have a little bit more of a way in.
Yeah, and this is a way again that like you can start becoming that person of authority. So for instance, again, if you go back to the poetry group, maybe you're not recognized the way you want to be, in your industry. But if you're able to bring in people who are, that also to a degree raises your own profile, because people turn to you like, oh, this person, he gets good information.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you become that sort of resource for people.
Yeah. I don't know. I think above all, just like whatever field that you're looking to get into, like don't especially in 2023, don't look at the same, don't view them with the same barriers as you would 10, 15, 20 years ago.
It's so different now. It's so different now.
Yeah, there's so many different ways to really be able to break in. Break in. That seems a little aggressive. Be able to get into a market, get in front of people, to be able to work with different brands, to be able to do different things with like kind of different, even like work cultures that you would not have been able to do. Maybe like, or maybe you just didn't see the avenues to be able to do years ago.
Yeah.
Oh wait, no, that was supposed to. Now you're just hearing two separate things at once. But it's just to say that like there's really no barriers. If you're just applying pressure and you're figuring, like, again, talking to the people, like don't let the fact that they're running they could have 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 followers or 50,000 people in the Facebook group or whatever the situation is. It hurts literally nothing for you to just say, well, let me reach out, let me see what can happen, because even if I can get 5 minutes of this person's time, like how can I use that 5 minutes to really push myself forward?
Yeah, I think another thing too, it's what we're talking about, trying to become that person of influence, trying to establish your authority. The other thing you want to think about too is, I think a lot of times we get hung up on this idea that like, oh, but I don't have this, I don't have the credentials. Like, why would anyone listen to me? I'm not qualified. You just need to be a step ahead of the person you're trying to help. You just need to be a step ahead. Like if you have one poem published, there's other poets out there that don't have any poems published, so you can kind of just walk them through the process, so you don't have to be some crazy expert. I have one other little thing, and then if you have anything else, feel free to add. So trying to, again, establish this community for yourself. One other technique you can do is kind of very similar. Again, we've talked about before, but talking about Pep and Poets. So it's really interesting. So Pep and Poets is free. In fact, I lose money. I buy pizza for people. It's a business expense. Because it's pretty much like a business lunch. And people come, and I would say I got messages. So 6 people come, because we basically select 6 people to come and attend. And out of those 6 people, at least 2 of them came up to me afterwards talking about, oh, I should be paying for this. Like, Jeff, you should be paying people to come for this. So like if you give something of value to people.
What you mean, like people like they're
people who attended people who attended Pep and Poets were like, hey, the next time you do it, you're gonna charge, right? Or this is gonna cost. Like it blows their mind that this is free.
Yeah.
When people see value in something, they're willing to pay. In fact, in a lot of ways, they want to give back, because like they feel guilty. It's just like, you can't just like give me all this stuff. Let me do something. Let me get you like a drink. Like let me do something. There's this sense of like reciprocity we have to do.
Also, I mean, I think it's also an odd thing with people. I mean, maybe not with all people, but actually there's another poet. I think he's still in the city. His name's Sirius. Shout out to Sirius.
Is he back? Is he in Cali?
I thought he was back.
Is he back?
I'm pretty sure he's back.
I know he's trying to do a cruise thing. I'm like,
yeah.
Anyways,
Anyways. Shout out to Sirius. I've known him for like a decade plus. Great guy and great poet. Really one of the people in the Columbus scene that really set an amazing example for, you know, just how to like push yourself in your art. But yeah, so we were actually in Akron years back, and it was at this like awards ceremony place. But that happened. So he actually had these CDs, and he was just like, he doesn't actually need the money from the CDs, but he sells them for $2. But the reason why he sells them for $2 is because, like, even if some people are like, and he sold out of his CDs, by the way, which he would have. I have the feeling that if he would have sold them at $10 a CD, he would have sold them out. So I mean, that's a whole different conversation. Great work, but which is just to say that I think a lot of times people are looking to be able to match the value with like the value that they're getting with what they're giving out. They're looking to match that because they're like, yeah, like this doesn't make any sense. Like if somebody just pulled up to me and said, "Hey, here's this Ferrari," I'm thinking to myself like, yeah, I can't afford the Ferrari. What's the catch? What's happening here? You know what I mean? No. Which is just to say, I mean, and again, it means that they're seeing the value. You clearly see the value in a Ferrari. Now you're just there is some feeling before that to where you're like, man, what do I get in return? So if somebody says, if somebody said, for this Ferrari, pay me $10,000, like you would do it because you're thinking to yourself, that's a Ferrari. You know what I mean? So I'm getting a lot more than I'm getting a lot more than I'm giving. And even in a situation like this, I think that if everybody that went to Pepin Poets or that goes to Pepin Poets is able to make, you know, meaningful strides in the direction of making their craft or their career, then the value of Pepin Poets is going to be, you're not going to be able to really quantify it. You know what I mean? And so like they're looking at it like, this is the Ferrari that I don't know how can I give you the equal value for the Ferrari that you're giving.
Yeah. And I think that, and again, when it comes to value and when people buy something when they feel that what they get in return is greater than what they're paying for. Even if it's like a perfect like 50-50, that's not enough. They have to feel like they're getting just a little bit more than what the charge is, you know? But going back, so how does this connect back to community building? So some sort, and then poets again, we talked about this before. Poets are so repulsed by the word free, but some sort of free event, like a recurring free event, is extremely helpful. Okay. And I see Bella has a question. We will get to this in a moment. Just hang tight, Bella. I know it's late. A recurring free event is helpful for establishing yourself as a point of authority, because if it's a free event that's tailored to something that you're an expert in, this is how you start to demonstrate that, yes, I know this is me. This is what I do. You know what I mean? And so this is a way that you can also start to get people introduced to you. We've talked about it in the past about from a people standpoint, the more interactions you have with a person, the more likely they want to, you know, continue interacting with you. And so another way to compound this is if people see you in different settings, like once like people become friends, we talked about, especially when they interact with you in 4 different places. And that can include online places as well, like, because the brain doesn't differentiate. Okay. So like it could be like Facebook, Instagram, met at an in-person event like this. So those are my 4 places. That a person who goes through those 4 different locations with me is more likely to interact with me in the future. So that's another thing too. You're starting to get people seeing you in a new spot. You're giving them new information. They're leaving with something of value. You're also helping. You're creating a little community. Like you're by creating that sort of event. And one suggestion we could talk about. I want to do more research on event creation and things like that. But one of the keys for creating events is limitations. So, for instance, limiting size. So, for instance, Pep and Poets, we limit it to 6. And a key to that is also trying to drive up 5 to 10 times engagement. So if I have 6 spots, I need, 20, 30 people expressing interest in attending and things like that, minimum, because that creates tension. You need tension. But I would be asking yourself, last practical step for me is, how can you create a regular recurring event? Recurring can mean weekly, it can mean monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly. I wouldn't want to go much beyond that though. I would say at least 4 times a year, if not more. That's based around something that you're interested in, that you can use to give value to people and get them introduced to you.
I also really appreciate the thought behind like kind of limiting the amount of people that have at least immediate access to something.
Yeah, because otherwise no one's going to do it.
Yeah. Well, because and it's also not only because if I have the feeling that the thing that I really want right now is just it's overly accessible, like if I actually, I mean, we can kind of branch it out to like a lot of different concepts, right? So let's talk about like water in certain areas. I don't know. Have you ever seen Dune?
I have not. I've seen like little clips of it, but
okay. So I'm not going to get into the weeds on it, but essentially Dune, like most of the movie takes place on a planet that has very little water, very limited resources when it comes to water. So the way that they use water is these very ingenious. They've figured out all these different ways to use water, which is just to say that if I put up a water stand, like if I put up a water stand over there, it's like, oh my god, I could sell a bottle of water for about like $10,000 because it's like, oh man, I'm not going to be able to see water, and I know that if you get this much water,
all the water
it's going to last me forever. But if you pull up water and you're like, okay, but hey, I'm going to be here for forever pretty much, and there's plenty of water, and actually you can get this water right now or you can get the water next week. You might be a little bit more casual about when you kind of get access to it. So just keeping things like that in mind. When you build up your platform and you build up your resources to be able to extend out, extend those margins out a lot further, then I mean, you can always do that. But I mean, at the very least, the beginning, when you're still limited, when you're more limited on resources, and I would say even like more limited on on impact at the time, kind of like creating that air of scarcity of I'm not going to be able to get in on this deal if I don't do it right now. Create that sense of urgency.
I mean, even large companies, I mean, we talked before, Apple does that every time they have a new product. What's the thing they say? We won't be able to beat demand. Won't be able to meet demand. Rolex, if you go into a Rolex shop and you ask to buy a watch,
Jeff got money.
Rolex shop. But if you go up in there and you ask for a watch, they won't give it to you. You can walk in with like the cash and they won't give you a watch. They'll say,
even if you
there's a wait list.
Put the bag on the counter and you say, do this or else.
I don't know what to tell you. Look at large companies. Scarcity is a tool. I do want to get to yes. Bella asked, what would you suggest to someone who doesn't know the value of their own work? So how I interpret this is kind of something that we talked about before too. Like if you don't view yourself as a particular authority on a topic, there's ways that you can still kind of compensate for that, like connecting yourselves with people who are. So, but even before that, I think the big question is positioning. Like what is your own work? What is the work? I need to know what the work is. So like, is the work poetry? But that's still not enough. I need to know what about poetry to give examples. So like we talked earlier about the workshop about zines. So like one guy wants to just make poetry zines. Okay, cool. That's a narrow thing. We talked about for Matthias talking about short film and poetry. trying to find a bridge to connect short film and poetry. Okay, so again, that's short films kind of big, poetry's kind of big, but then suddenly you link those together. Now we have something that's a little bit more narrow, right? So the very first thing I would say is trying to decide what is your actual specific position, and as you're deciding your position, you choose it. You can target whatever you want, but also understand, like, based on your own ability, like if I might really, really, really like baking. I know nothing about baking though. So that would probably be a poor choice on my part to make baking my position. You know what I mean? Unless I was like, okay, so if I wanted to position that, it's like, okay, I know nothing about baking. So how if I wanted to start a whole thing around baking, the angle that I could do is I could be, all right, the dad, like 30-something-year-old dad gets introduced to baking for the first time. That's my position. So now I'm doing that because now I am the expert in that, because I am the expert beginner, because like I'm perfect. I am so perfectly suited for this. So I have just gone from not knowing anything to suddenly becoming the expert, because this is me, the 30-something-year-old dad who has to bake at midnight because I work jobs and I take care of my kids. So midnight is the only time I could bake. Yeah. So now I have so now I am the expert at this. You know what I mean? So I have just put myself in the position doing what I need to do. But then again, once you do that, again, you can we talked about some strategies for ways you can connect with other people who are authorities and things like that. But that's kind of, I think before anything, I need to know what your specific position is.
Yeah. And I also think, so I think when I read that question, I think I'm reading it almost to say like there is an intrinsic specific value to somebody's work and you're trying to figure out what that is. And there's this group of guys, and I'm not gonna, but there's this group of guys that actually there's one specific person. He's a poet, and he's a poet that, I don't know that he has like works that kind of chronicle that you would necessarily hear about a lot. But he's incredibly large in the social media, like media sphere. And he's like really, really large. Like he has like product, he has like games and stuff like that. And he does like basically like kind of relationship based work, like relationship based content, like podcasts and stuff like that. But he's like really, really huge. But like, one of the things that I would say about that is that, like, let's say like years ago, he's a poet who just does poems about relationships. You know what I mean? Like, in just different relationship dynamics. And regardless of what you felt about that person's work, it's like, so like, let's say if I'm listening to the person's work, it's not really like pulling me in. It's whatever. Like that's neither here nor there, because there's a large contingency of people that are like, they just enjoy that kind of content. Maybe they don't even necessarily enjoy poetry that much, which it ended up like the thing that ends up happening is like now not a lot of people know him even as a poet. You know what I mean? He has poetry books that he's self-published that have sold more copies than a lot of your favorite poets. You know what I'm saying? Like he self-published his own work and people like go to it and they resource it and they love it, but it's not necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily say like, okay, like this is my favorite. Like what even poems that about relationship dynamics, it's like this or this, like I'm going to choose this over here. But this person was able to really build a brand, and really captivate people that are attracted, like that are coming into his, that like, he's really, really huge, like as far as like his platform is concerned. And so I would think more along those lines, like as opposed to thinking, okay, what is maybe my intrinsic value, or like what I imagine my value. It's like, what is your value to who? That's the question. So like, okay, maybe you're in a space right now where it's like, I can't, maybe I'm a poet amongst a lot of poets, and maybe that's good, maybe that's great, and maybe you could, maybe you could be incredibly active, because again, there's a lot of people that are, I think a lot of stuff that we're talking about here that are doing things with poetry that's not just poetry. It's not poetry centered. There's other things that it's centered, that you're writing is now enhancing or pushing that aren't just the poems themselves. And so when I'm thinking about that question, I'm thinking about what is the audience that you're talking about, and also when you're saying like the value of your work, it's like if I am alone in the woods and I am like walking through the woods, like a flashlight has immense value. Right. I'm like, oh my God. Like if I'm alone in the woods and it's dark, like a flashlight has immense value. And maybe like that's like the most valuable a flashlight will ever be if I'm like walking alone in the woods late at night and I'm trying to find my way home. But in broad daylight, in the middle of an office building, maybe a flashlight has zero. Like I'm like, it's not going to do me any good. Right. And so it's just really as opposed to maybe thinking about what maybe an intrinsic, like a set value would be, really just think about, okay, my poetry has a fluctuating level of value or a fluctuating value like level depending on where I'm at, who I'm speaking to, what my what my audience might be. Because just like what Jeff was talking about earlier, even when we're talking about who your audience is and who you're really directing your messages to, again, that's when being specific and really kind of cutting your themes or cutting things down to like a specific audience possible. Because again, watching somebody on TV that's a Black man, that's gonna pull me in. But watching somebody on TV as a Black man that came up from a very specific religious background, that's gonna pull me in more. Oh, maybe they've had family members that went through this. That's gonna pull. You're gonna continue to really cut into this audience and this demographic until you strike gold, and now you've reached a Facebook group full of like thousands of people, or maybe you've reached a section of Twitter or something like that, to where all those people that have those specific kind of thing. And again, you're gonna also reach people that are they don't share all those identities. You're gonna reach people that maybe don't share any of those identities, but they just find it kind of entertaining. But the people that are going to push you forward the most are going to be those people that you're able to really cut into and get through all the other people that might be somewhat interested, to the people that are going to really incredibly resonate with your work.
Yeah, we need to do an episode on pricing. Pricing is super interesting and fun. One last thing that might be helpful for this is there's a guy named David Shands. He's on the Social Proof podcast. If you guys like business talk, that's a podcast you might enjoy. And when he's working, with new clients, he helps like entrepreneurs. Basically, one framework he works with is I help blank do blank by blank. And if you can answer this question, or like fill in this sentence, it can kind of help direct you to work. Because again, the other thing is that you don't determine the value of your work. Other people do, because it depends on what they need. Whatever they value is always going to be the most important thing, because you are serving them. Okay. But to take a look at this sentence again, it's like, I'll use us as an example. So the verses, professional poetry development for underrepresented voices, right? So we help underrepresented voices develop their writing in a professional way to elevate their writing and also their business acumen with regards to writing. By how do we do this? We host workshops. We have a podcast. And we have our primarily our YouTube channel. It's like the videos we produce for that. Because that would be my answer right now to that question. What would your answer to that question be? You help who do what by what? If you can answer that question, you have an idea of what you're actually serving and what your platform is and things like that. Yeah. Whew, that's a lot of information.
It's a lot of information. But I feel like, it was good information.
I think it's good information.
So we did good.
So again, these are practical tips to help you. Bella says that was helpful. Look, we
did it.
We did a thing. Like, yeah, we did a thing. That's great. These are all tips to help you start thinking about creating a community around your work, creating yourself as a position of authority, or techniques to at least start getting people to view you as such. If you have questions, if you try these things out, if you have other tips that we didn't touch on today, please let us know in the comments. I also just want to highlight again, we mentioned Pep and Poets a lot. Pep and Poets, for those of you based in Columbus, Ohio, is held on the first Sundays of the month. Okay, seats are limited. We have a Facebook group that if you're interested in this, you do need to join the Facebook group because we choose people from there. Also, if you're interested in doing video services, keep an eye out because we have free webinars talking about ways to create your own video course. In addition to some other offerings are going to be coming out soon.
Yeah.
Nice. But to close us out, my name is Jeff.
My name is Name, but you can call me Matthias.
Forgot about that. Yes, you've been watching Diversus Live. We'll be back next Tuesday right at this time. Thank you guys so much. Have a good day, good night, good afternoon.